What is going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Listen podcast. First off, thank you so much for listening. My guest today is a therapist and relationship coach. She is also the founder of the Men's Mental Health Institute. Christie Chan, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are
I'm
you?
doing
Thanks
very
for
good.
having me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to talk to you. I feel like relationships in 2024 and just dating in 2024, men in 2020, there's just so many things to talk about. So I guess the first thing I want to ask you is, why did you choose specifically to focus on men's mental health as opposed to mental health in general?
That's a really good question. So, coming out as a practitioner, I definitely just focused on general mental health. Um, some specific reasons that I turned to men specifically was one's personal and one's like more practice wise. Personal specifically was as an Asian, okay? I grew up in a very like traditional collectivistic, like men in my family don't talk about like, hey, I don't have my shit together. I didn't know that they were struggling specifically every single day and that sometimes they're not strong, right? Or that they have emotions. And so there's me like getting all of the good treatment from the men in my family,
Mhm.
essentially, right? Like, I can be whiny, like, I can have a bad day. And then there's my brother and my grandpa that, like, always is like, hey, like, sit me down and, like, hey, what's going on, right? And then so I was very feminine coming out and I was like, oh, I'm gonna be a therapist. I'm gonna help people, right? Like, I'm like passionate about this. And then I got a wake up call right out of practice and I was trying to help both men and women. Women, I connected with very easily. And you're taught in like school to not like genderize and things like that. But you don't know sometimes, like, if I'm built as a woman, right? It's sometimes easier to connect or understand their thoughts. But men, when you want to help them, when I was in general practice, like, it was so hard to either feel as though I was adding value to the session and providing solutions that they really require without just me trying to kind of going like, oh, how do you feel about that?
Mm.
Oh, tell me more about your emotions, right? Tell me more about how that made you feel um, in turmoil, right? And then talking about the emotions too much, but then not providing them with like real tactical solutions of how to be authentic with their needs and that you don't have to like feminize yourself in a way of like talking about emotions too much, but creating tactical practice that can help them understand the tools that they need to kind of connect with the women around them and people around them. And so sometimes it got to over repetitive, same topics, talking about your mother, talking about the traumas, right?
Mm.
And then they just didn't know what to do with it, right? It's like they know the theories behind their issues. Like, it's like, now what, right?
Mhm.
So I felt my clients weren't coming back. Like, men specifically, they weren't coming back. And so I was like, okay, that's wrong, right?
Mhm.
Like, that's got to be something I'm doing wrong, right? And then I changed up my tactics a little bit, did a little bit of more research, asked my professor and things like that. And they were like, okay, did you try CBT, right? Did you try something that is more um, solution focused, is the practice term? And I changed up the way I talked. I was more blunt. I wasn't pitying them. Hey, I'm not here to talk emotions to kind of pity you and reassure you. Let's really focus on how you're feeling, what we can do about it, and then trying it.
Mm.
And then that made me see men in a different way, which kind of like cured my personal trauma in my personal life. And also understand like men want solutions, but sometimes in therapy, it just takes a little bit too long and they don't know where it's going. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, providing solutions quickly. And men are like, I just liked working with men because they were so practical. It took maybe a couple less sessions to actually get to the point that they need to be versus like women. It would go like back and forth, back and forth, back and
Yeah.
forth, right? So yeah, that's why.
Yeah, I feel like you hit it right on the nose. I feel like definitely for myself and for most of the men I know, they're very solution driven.
Yeah.
I think even in my own relationship, if my girlfriend comes to me and she had a bad day or she wants to talk through something we've worked on and I've been trying to get better at is asking her, do you want like support right now or do you want a solution? Because for me, anytime she tells me there's a problem, I'm like, okay, we'll do this and that'll fix the problem. But it's like, well, no, that's not how she works. So that's not how a lot of women work. It's like, no, they're not looking for a solution. They just want to vent. They want your support in whatever they're going through, but they don't necessarily want a solution. But for
Mm-hmm.
men, and like we talked about this before we went live, but I've done therapy myself and it wasn't very solution focused, and I stopped doing therapy
No,
because
I
of that,
hear
I
you.
feel.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
a very common problem with therapy. Like, I see it as a problem. And there's not a lot of practitioners out there that, and because okay, like in the school of therapy, you're taught to not really look at gender as
Mhm.
like a you're
Factor.
yeah, like a factor of how you practice,
Why is
right?
that?
Oh, I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this. um maybe like how society has really been brought up, right? Like
Mhm.
free speech and things like that. Like you
Mhm.
want to see them as like gender fluid and like all that stuff. But I always think I start off with one thought, and then if you're different, right, then we can kind of negotiate, and you teach me like how are you different in terms of how generally we believe men should be working, right? So um yeah, we're not supposed to really look at men and women differently, and I see that as one of like the issues that I had in practice for sure, that I kind of went in without much structure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that very odd, and I get what where you're coming from in terms of like
Yeah.
it's 2024 and like,
Yeah.
but I don't view it as like necessarily treating them differently, but
It's
it's like
just,
almost having different like different formulas and different ways to go about talking to them, and it is definitely generalizing because it's not to say all women like would benefit from this style and all men would benefit from that style, but I feel like there are common you know common tendencies between men and common tendencies between women that would you would benefit from knowing kind of how to go about getting the best out of them. I don't know if that makes sense.
it
I feel like it I don't think it's weird to be like, oh, well, we can approach this with women in one way and men in a different way, you
yeah,
know?
exactly, and that's something that has really helped a lot in terms of like we generalize first, right? We generalize first,
Hmm.
and then we'll see how you're different, right? But then sometimes like we're basically not taught to not generalize at all, like not form any judgments in the beginning. That's like like therapy 101.
Yeah.
And that's usually like it probably takes like the practitioner will use like maybe 3 or 4 sessions with that school of thought. And then for men, like you lose them after like 2 sessions of like not generalizing, not forming any judgments. Like you teach me, I'm like, I'm only talking, right? Like you show, like give me some feedback here, right? It's 2 hours of my day. Like, come on, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, no, let's start with some concrete generalizations and then we'll kind of like change things up. So, yeah, that's why men kind of like, no, this is common BS, right? Like been through this, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like that's exactly what happened to me with so we were talking about it. I've only like gone to one therapist before. It was the
Yeah.
beginning of this year where I tried it. It was on online BetterHelp, and I think I did 5 or 6 sessions,
Mm,
and then I don't want to say gave up, but I was like, okay, I was doing a little bit better. I'm like, I think, next time I do this, I might want to look at getting a different therapist, just a different point of view. I feel like something that a lot of people say is like, you really have to find the right person. Like it is almost like dating in terms of like finding the right person for you, like finding the right therapist is its own thing. But yeah, for me, like 5, 6 sessions, and I felt like, yeah, it was kind of just general stuff and the person couldn't really relate to me too much. And I was like, okay, I don't think this is for me.
yeah, I hear you. I hear you a lot. So I guess one of the tips I would give you next time if you are looking for a therapist is like, and I tell this to all my clients, like have the intention of, it's what you put into it, right? Like, have the intention of genuinely wanting to be proved wrong or
Mm.
like being challenged, right? If you are going in with the intention of trying to feel better, common misconception as well, you probably won't.
Mm.
If you do come out of it either feeling better or more positive, right? You're not learning something. You
Mm.
should come out of it almost a little bit more confused because you got more information from something,
Yeah.
a little bit more triggered, a
Makes
little
you
bit.
think about it
It
more.
makes you, yeah, it makes you question yourself a little bit more, and that is a good point, right? What you choose to, what you feel afterwards, like a little bit more challenge, and then what you choose to do with it after, obviously, like you have to practice now and change. That is a productive session.
Mm.
So if you're coming out of it feeling like, oh my God, I'm the best person ever, or like, yeah, it was totally, XYZ's fault, my mother's fault, like blah, 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 then you don't need, you're right. It's
Yeah.
not a good session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never thought about it like that. I think that's that's good. Like not necessarily yeah, cuz it makes you think like, "Oh, yeah, nothing was my fault. This was this person's fault, that person's fault," but it's yeah, almost better to come out of it like you said with more questions because then I feel like I do my like the most of my growth when I'm thinking very intensely about like, well, why am I feeling this way? Like what can I do to feel better? Like what is the root of this,
Yeah.
also thinking about it more is probably how you grow as a person or
Yeah.
so I wanted to ask you when we initially started talking about having you on the podcast, you mentioned to me modern dating gaps. What does that mean exactly?
Oh gosh. Okay. So I guess to talk about modern dating, you really have to talk about dating in the past,
Mm.
right? Um and so dating in general, right? Like what's the point of dating specifically is to in history, right? It's to reproduce, right? It's to create a family. It's to create a family so that your genes get passed on, right? How modern dating has changed specifically is that a lot of the values that I believe do make dating intentional, um, goal driven, right? It gets completely taken away, right? Like you have dating apps are like swipe, 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 right? You have dating apps specifically that creates the false illusion that you can be list oriented, right? And it prevents you from actually connecting with that person's main attributes of what actually is the bare foundation of what a relationship requires, which
Mm.
is like respect, right? Discipline. You understand what your standards are, trust, loyalty, right? And so it's just like we start almost from like top down, right?
What are your favorite shows? What foods do you like? You're saying like that kind of stuff is like
Yeah.
not as important, obviously, as like you said,
Yeah,
trust, respect.
exactly. Like chemistry that like that, right? Creates a false illusion of chemistry versus like is that person going to be able to create a partnership? And even the whole idea of modern dating right now being like highly casual because I genuinely believe like in history, right, with women having it's kind of polarizing, okay? But women having birth control be injected into now the dating relationships, like the obligation of being more, I guess, a little bit the natural tendency of being fearful of getting pregnant, like
Mhm.
child rearing, responsibilities of getting pregnant is kind of taken away from women. And so they're almost it's creating this like cycle of toxic like, and I'm gonna get in so much trouble saying this, but like this overly self sexualization
Mm.
that of women, but it's almost like their birth control, right? And the detachment of responsibility has created almost they've done it on their
Mhm.
own, right? Not knowing just by taking birth control, you're subconsciously influencing yourself to think that way. And same with men, right? Like birth control being introduced, right? Men don't really have to think about, where they're putting in it, right? They don't have to think about like, oh, like, wait a minute. If I get this woman pregnant, is she going to be a crazy ass bitch, right? Like, because that's obligation, that's responsibility. And it just creates this like quick, fast, easy dopamine hits that are like, okay, people are getting a little bit lost, I think, in modern dating. And it's fast, like the fast pace with dating apps and things like that. You can get it one tomorrow, you can get one today, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think you're totally right. Like even just thinking about conversations I've had with my friends, talking about like kind of hookup culture and
yeah,
you don't really think about like, oh, like what if she gets pregnant? Because everyone's like, oh no, she's on birth control, it's good. So it's just like, yeah, that worry is completely out of the window. And then it eliminates the thought of like, oh, is this meaningful at all? Like, do I actually care about this person? It's like, no, it's just sex.
yeah,
and if there's no risk or presumably no risk if someone's on birth control, then they're like, oh, then it doesn't matter. And that
yeah,
I get what you mean. It kind of creates this culture that we're in now, or
yeah.
hookup culture essentially.
Which is, I always say it's totally fine, right? Like, but I always tell clients and people, like, just know how far end of the spectrum you're in, right? Like, casual dating, casual sex for women and men, like, it's very liberating, right? Like, it's something that is a benefit of where we're at today. But I'm just talking to the people who let it get to the point in which it becomes too much almost, right? And they, like women, end up almost like using it to resent men, right? Resent men completely, get back at men, right? Like, I don't care, casual sex, like, I only need you because for that, you're only good for that, right? And then I'm independent, I can do whatever, right? So just know which end of the spectrum you're in, I think is really important. Same with men, like, that's really important as well.
How much do you feel social media has changed the way we date and relationships and that kind of fast, hookup culture?
Um, That's a really good question. I thought about this many, many times. I can go on and on. Men are attracted to physicalities, right?
Absolutely.
Like faces, like pretty faces. Like in science, it's unified faces or symmetrical faces. And women will always, always do things in order to get the attention of the highest level man. Okay, so social media. Sorry, social media has created that in effect with clicks. So men are liking women's like bodies, right? Faces, whatever they choose, women are choosing to say, right? Those likes and those comments, like, yeah, you're so sexy, right? Like, those comments are reinforcing women's behaviors. And women, to get those behaviors, are posting those things, right? So you have like women who are half naked almost, right? And like all that, all trying to live up to trying to get attention from men. And so it's created exactly the self-sabotaging kind of like, men say they don't want that type of women, right? The ones that are going to cheat on them, and like the ones that are attention seeking of other men, right? And things like that. But they don't know, by just what you're consuming and liking every single day, right? That's creating like this population of women who are just trying to reassure you. And try to get your attention, right? And so it's created that, like, the society of just cyclic, like they're feeding off of each other, I think. So I always say, just be careful of what you're liking, men and women, right? Don't say that you don't want a woman half naked and things like that, or going out XYZ, but you're liking that outside of your girlfriend stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, and vice versa, like, women who are like, oh, I just want a kind man, but then you're liking these like posts in which are kind of like validating those people's actions, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I know. Like my girlfriend and I have had this conversation multiple times, and I'm trying to remember what she called it, or if that's actually like the official. I think she said like the Madonna horror complex or something like that. Basically, just the fact that like a lot of guys will say like, yeah, I'm into this. Like oh, like this is sexy, this is hot. Like a picture, like say I don't know, say a girl that's completely tatted up or something. Like
Yeah,
oh, I think that's so sexy that like I love that, but I wouldn't be with someone that's like that. So
exactly.
it's like oh, so why are you liking it in the first place?
Yeah.
Because if you like it, then you see more of it, and like whether it's conscious or subconscious, it's changing the way you're thinking for sure.
Yeah, and not only that, it's like it's changing the way you're thinking, but it's also like you're providing the validation in which is creating
The whole
the
culture.
whole culture,
Mm,
exactly, the whole society that you're building. Like it's a granular process, right? It really adds up. And what is attraction? What is beauty, right? Like, yeah, I wouldn't wife her, but I would, F her, right? And
mhm,
it's like, shouldn't there be a little bit of unity between what you find is beauty and what you find like I don't understand, right?
mhm.
So yeah, be careful.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like social media is such an amazing thing and provides so much value, but on the other side, there's you, like as a man, you can go on. I can go on Tinder or whatever, and you see thousands of girls, whatever, and just with the swipe of a finger, it's like I think she's hot. I don't think she's hot. I want to hook up with her. I don't want to hook up with her. And I feel like it's dangerous on both sides because it gives these unrealistic expectations to women of what they should look like or what they need to do. But on the other side, it gives these unrealistic expectations of what women do look like to men.
Yeah.
And men and then you start to realize like, well, no, that's not what a lot of women look like, or even the women that are on social media doing this, that's not even what they look like. And it becomes very, very dangerous because you
Mhm.
you really remove yourself from the real world.
Mhm.
It's
Exactly.
terrifying.
Yeah, I completely agree. It is really terrifying. And that's like bleeding into that whole you're online, you're a completely different facade, and then in person, you're complete. I hear a lot of clients basically just in turmoil. Like you wouldn't even know,
Mm,
right? Like that person, Instagram wise, like he seems like he's got it going, right? Like things are, it's an image, but then in their life, they're isolated. They don't have one friend that they can genuinely talk to, right? Like they are completely in turmoil and yeah, just yeah, be careful with what you're consuming and validating for sure.
I feel like it's almost the exact same thing with social media when it comes to relationships. I firmly have the belief, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, but I truly believe that for the most part, couples that are constantly posting on social media that like, that they're happy that they went here, that they went there, I personally believe that they're not as happy as a lot of the couples that don't post as much. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with posting. I post pictures with my girlfriend all the time. We travel, whatever, but it's the couples that like constantly it's almost like their whole personality is showing off their relationship. I feel that they tend to not be that happy.
Yeah, I do. I know what you're talking about. I've had the same question as well, and I definitely because I just think like if you're making it a routine, right? Like what are the gaps in which you're being filled, right? You got to set up the camera. You got to think about what you're recording. You got to think about how you want to look, right? You got to have a certain look. And then there's videos that are 30 seconds long, but it actually in reality, right, it takes a good couple minutes, right?
Hmm.
At least maybe half an hour and like that planning, right? Like that could be, I don't know, sitting down and really connecting with that person. Um, yeah, I definitely hear and heard stories that, they seemed great online and then they're getting a divorce,
Hmm.
right? So, yeah.
What do you think about couples who kind of work together in the social media world? Like, do you think it kind of can put a strain on the relationship?
Generally speaking, yes.
Hmm.
But again, it depends on, I guess, how aware each person in the relationship is with what how much control that lifestyle has brought to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important maybe with couples who do that in a regular basis, and even maybe for money, right? It's their livelihood, right? That they understand like this is a job, right? And then outside they are making space for like connectiveness and communication and like how checking in on each other and do you know, what can I do better, right? The relationship aspect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, it gets intertwined quite often. And I can only assume, and I don't have that lifestyle, but I can only assume like if your lifestyle is your work life and you don't have like a barrier and a clear cut line between like what is work and what is your personal life, it can bleed into your relationship for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Yeah, I've even found with people ask me all the time with my regular content, like why I don't have my girlfriend in a lot of my videos, and people be, oh, like, are you hiding her or whatever? I'm like, no, like
Tell
if
us,
you
it's
follow my
oh my
personal
gosh.
page, you would see her all the time.
Yeah.
It's just I really want to be careful about bringing her into that world because one, it's work. Two, like I really do like that it is kind of my thing. It's what I like to do. But something we've been, learning is her and I have a food page together and we're not anywhere near like making money off it, anything like that, but it has slowly started to turn into work a little bit. We love going out to the dinners and stuff like that, but it's like, oh, when we need to sit down and edit the video and write the script and do that, it's like, oh, we need to, I guess, learn how to not make it feel like work and kind of be careful about, if this ball continues to roll and it turns into a money thing, how we're going to go about handling that and still keeping, like, putting our relationship first. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a really intentional thought for sure. And it sounds like you guys both have really clear communication though.
We definitely try to. I cannot complain about our communication. We're very like, we like to say it how it is. Like I don't know, if I'm upset, like I feel like a lot of people will, okay, I'm gonna try to just be quiet or like get angry or whatever. And it's like, no, like let's have the conversation, let's talk it out. It's not always easy to do. And I am someone who I I don't want to say shut down, but
Mm.
if we're having a difficult conversation, I'm someone who tends to get a little bit quiet and like try to internally deal with everything and think about everything before I say something. And that's something I have needed to and continue to work on because it doesn't help her when I get quiet. We're kind
Mm.
of on different sides of that spectrum. So that's something that I have to definitely work on.
Yeah, and it's always going to be there, as long as you're aware of it and you
Hmm.
communicate it, right? It's important for partners to just know their tendencies, right? And what's really important is secure relationship, and it sounds like you guys have one for sure, right?
Absolutely.
Is just not taking those things personally,
Hmm.
right? Like, oh, him taking a break doesn't mean he doesn't love me, right?
Yeah.
It's just he needs his moment right
Yeah.
now. And then same thing, right? Like if your girlfriend's blowing up on you, it's not take it personally. That's
Hmm.
how she chooses to deal with it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's it's honestly it's been very good. Like she's been slowly learning that if I'm quiet, it doesn't mean I'm mad at her. It doesn't mean I'm upset. It's just sometimes I'm quiet. And I've been learning to at least vocalize to her that I'm going to be a little bit quiet for a little while and this is why and there's not anything wrong. And it's been very good.
that's awesome.
Something I wanted to ask you about, especially in Canada, but really for most of the world, um, a lot of young people, their parents are first generation immigrants
Mm.
and can often bring kind of that culture in their world and kind of put it on their kids, and oftentimes it's bad habits, whether it be relationships or a whole bunch of things. How do you think that kind of can affect kids as they grow up in terms of them having their own relationships, trust, dependency, all that kind of stuff?
Okay, yeah. Like I get asked this a lot, the whole generational trauma thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and to me, it's always about control. Like, there's something in the values in which your parents have probably instilled in you that are very productive, right?
Mm.
Like, I always believe that, like, if you're a parent, most generally speaking, you're not trying to teach the worst things to your kids, right? But like the person who's receiving it, which is the child, is normally going to kind of have their own perceptions of what that means. And like most of the times when it comes to trauma, and everybody has trauma, okay? Um, they are seeing it in a negative way, right? So I always say when it comes to any teachings of parents, right? Um, take the positives of things that they teach you, like take what it was supposed to be. For
Mm.
instance, like in my family, like suck it up, try harder, right? Pull yourself back up, right? Like there's some positives in that. But the negatives are probably your trauma, which is like you didn't feel loved, you didn't feel cared for, you didn't feel understood, right? And so take the positives and work on the negatives, right? And then you have you, right? And you have your equation of what was healed means. So there's good in everything, right? Um, I always say with families who are extremely traditional, um, there's probably proactive things in which led them to teach you that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so let's not think about that as a negative way, right? But what were the negatives? Now that's your work to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
And what about when it comes to, parents kind of bringing this thought process that mental health isn't
Mm.
a thing? And like you said, coming from like Asian background, and I mean, basically identical, like me coming from Middle Eastern background. Yeah, oftentimes, especially with men, mental health doesn't exist. Mental health gets swept under the rug. So, what do you think? Men, I mean, anyone really, but specifically men, growing up in those kinds of households and those environments, what do they need to do um, in order to ensure that they that their mental health is good and that they understand it is legitimate, it's
it's
real.
it's a real thing,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. I think it's really important to know the difference between emotions and mental health. So a lot of times families who don't talk about emotions specifically was because there was they were taught, parents specifically, maybe Middle Eastern, even my family, right? Chinese, right? Very traditional Chinese, like that stuff is useless,
Hmm.
right? But it's all about, as a person, like how do you open up that conversation specifically is you talk about your emotions and you ask for what you need, right? So for instance, I feel this, I need you to do this in order for me to get to this solution, right? Like I need this because I feel this way, right? And if it stops at that, normally parents would just be like, okay, well, let's look it up. They don't know how to deal with it, right?
Mm.
Normally parents are like, okay, what do you want me to do? Like my grandma would just kind of cut me fruits and just go like, okay, just go, right? But if you're the person who wants to open up that conversation, it's important to also admit that like you need help. So how do you communicate that? This is how I feel. This is what I need you to do to
Mm.
walk me through it. And it provides like that live leeway to them actually, oh, it is useful. This is mental health. This is how I provide value in your mind, right?
Mhm.
But most of the times it's not talked about because honestly, families don't know how to deal with it. They don't
Mhm.
have the tools to help their child deal with it. It's like, okay, well, they're taught it's useless. So it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to teach you it's useless.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think like myself, for example, growing up, I've always, even until now, viewed like my dad as like the strongest guy.
Yeah.
Like never really shows emotion. Like he's a super nice guy, super loving. Like he's like literally the best dad in the world. But I've never really had any like serious conversations with him about emotion. And I feel like it's or about like my emotions or like mental health and that kind of stuff. And yeah, I feel like a lot of it is because, well, for him, he lost his parents at a very young age, so he never had the opportunity to even try to open that conversation with them. So I feel like, yeah, that makes sense that he was never given the tools in order to have that conversation.
Yeah.
But I also do know that if I ever needed to talk to him about it, he would be very open to having that conversation and him learning himself.
Exactly, and him learning, that's exactly it. Because sometimes what I see with parents, and even my parents specifically, like, they just don't know how to deal with it. They
Mhm.
see you struggling, but they just don't know how to open up the conversation. So just by changing up your sentences, like, hey, I'm feeling really bad. I have this going on. Like, can you give me some of your thoughts?
Mm.
What do you think? Right? And in doing this, if you walk me through this, it would make me feel supported, and telling them that. And then it's like a light bulb goes off, right? And they go into like caring and loving mode. And it's like, yeah, of course,
Yeah,
right?
because they want to help.
Yeah,
That's
they
what they
want to, they
want.
just don't know how,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Something I find very interesting is on your bio or in your bio, it says, I help men raise standards and find true love. Talk to me about raising standards.
Ooh. Very minimum. Like, women are taught to have standards, right? Men are not really taught to have that. And standards by actually understanding, like, you're not always the one that has to be the hero, right? Like, not what society, it's like it's environment plus like your biology, but in a relationship, it's important for you to take that like like strong alpha masculine identity away and test the woman if she's going to provide you with the values in which you need to sustain yourself. So for instance, like, yes, you can do things at 100%, provide solutions for everything, but do you want to in a relationship?
Mhm.
So it's the difference, right? Like, yes, you're totally solution focused as a man and you should do that, right? But in a relationship, maybe you need to back off a bit, right? And test out if a woman's going to reciprocate, right? And I see a lot of clients who are like going straight at it, like puffing and puffing, right? Like, I can do this, I can do that. Like, I'm a man of value, right? Like, look at my car, look at how much money I have and all that stuff, right? But they're not testing like the bare minimum things, which is, hey, if you're having a bad day, right? What does she do with it, right? So have standards, have the bare minimum standards. Women are taught to have a list of standards, right? Like, God, a man's got to be this, right? But I'm just generalizing from what I see. Like, men's lists are so low. She just needs to be friendly, right? Kind, compassionate, and like, I'm like, okay, let's have a little bit more, right? Like, it's okay, right? Women are like, you got to do this, and every other guy is like thrown out the window, right?
Mhm.
And men don't have that thought, right? And so I think it's a very powerful thing for men to start thinking about what are the granular things that matter to them, right? If this woman needs to, like, let's say, I had a client say this, like, needs to like anime, right?
Mhm.
I don't know, right? So it's okay to be choosy,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's extremely important for men to understand that, like, it is okay to know that, like, your standards are extremely important and you don't have to, just go with the bare minimum of things just because, you had a woman
Mhm.
like you a little bit.
Do you find that there are a lot of men who get into relationships and down the road, once they've been, together for a long time, find that the woman might not be exactly what they're looking for, what they need, might not be as compatible as they originally thought, but find themselves staying in the relationship and I guess, for lack of a better term, settling, um, due to like a fear of not being able to find someone else?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have, like, just last week I had a client. I feel like word verbatim, I feel like I have to choose between exciting versus boring.
Hmm.
Straight up.
Really?
Yeah. And it's a very common thing. And that is a little bit I guess you could say, like, what I call like trauma based. It's very reactive, right? Like, you can have a woman who has good qualities and can have be exciting, right? It's just how you choose to go about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you trying to connect to her? But if you have the like the mindset that like, okay, the first second date just got it has to be like really exciting, right? And you didn't get that. And then you meet a girl who's somewhat boring, right? And then you also don't put effort or try to like tease her and flirt and like take away the barrier a little bit, right? And see if like she was just anxious. Um it can create that, right?
Mm.
Sometimes, yeah. That's so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there are I mean I know so many people who like I'll say this. I know a lot of people that over the last few years have gotten into relationships and it has almost caused them to become different people and
Mm.
change. And I've lost friends over the last few years
Oh.
from, getting into relationships, and it's hard to put into words, but not like to me not seeming like they're happy, but perhaps they could be, and struggling to kind of find a balance between
Mm.
work and family and
Oh.
significant other and friends. Do you find that that's kind of a common thing, like guys getting into relationships and then not finding a way to balance everything and kind of cutting off friends or slowly phasing friends out?
Yeah, for sure. I see that a lot, right? And um that just goes by essentially, like I always say, that's why men need to have standards.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Like, so important. And that goes with like the trying to understand like um that it's important for you to want to have a little bit of agency of yourself, right? And what's important to you to be sane. Um so yeah, like the separateness normally is, and a lot of men do use work outside life as an escape,
Mm,
right? And that just kind of shows me like, okay, your relationship has a lot of work that just left went unresolved.
mm,
Maybe you have a fear of like bringing it up and creating another conflict, or there's something that's not being done
mm,
that can make your relationship actually and family life like a positive thing that's actually making you work harder,
mm,
right? And dream bigger and take bigger risks, right? It should be a positive thing. But if it's not doing that, if you're using something else to escape and that's dragging you down, right? Yeah, it can create two lives. And I've had clients who basically, are texting multiple women online, but they really want to connect with their wife,
mhm,
but they just have this alter ego online that they're trying to live. And normally it's just to feel alive. It's like they want to feel like themselves. They want to feel something,
mm.
right? Yeah.
Do you find that, like, what kind of advice would you give to men who feel that they are like almost settling in a relationship, and whether it be fear of not being able to find someone else if they get out of the relationship, or a fear of, um, whether they're good enough? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of advice do you give to guys who are in a relationship and feel kind of trapped?
Trapped. Well, this is a question in which I would definitely have to dig a little bit more, but men who are feeling as though they're trapped, they're probably right.
Mm,
It's coming from somewhere. Whether it's either you're not the relationship, like you're not trying to be mean or um, feel guilty of breaking up with someone that genuinely just doesn't please you in the way that you really need to, although kind, although great person,
mhm,
right? Um, and you have that fear of essentially hurting her, or, oh, am I going to find someone? What if I don't find someone who's ever going to satisfy me in that way, right? it's all a individualistic thing, right? And so I would tell them to really sit down and ask themselves, what is this relationship giving me, right? And yeah, what is it giving me? Is it just for genuine comfort and companionship?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it like I can imagine building something or having like the qualities that I really need? So, yeah, if you're settling, you're probably right, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you have that feeling it's coming from somewhere. So, number one thing is don't avoid it.
Yeah.
You can't avoid it. This is going to bleed into your life. It's going to bleed into everything you do. You're going to hurt her even more,
Mm-hmm.
right? Vice versa. Um, and know where that's coming from. Is it just like, hey, you haven't, it's not exciting enough? Are there things to do, or is it something deeper,
Mm-hmm.
like values and things like that?
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those things, kind of like you said, like it's still going to hurt her. Like it's almost like it's going to hurt her
Yeah.
no matter what. It's just one can hurt her by leaving, like breaking up, whatever, and the other could be hurting her by not being the person that she deserves, not the person that she doesn't deserve, but not being the partner that she wants, and her not being the partner that you want, and
Yeah,
it
vice versa.
just
Yeah.
it's pain either way. It's just kind of one is forever if you just decide to settle forever
Yeah.
or be unhappy, and the other is quick and fast and painful, but
Yeah, yeah, and be and normally, the fear of making that decision is just there's no awareness, right?
Mhm.
There's no understanding of like, is she yes or is she no?
Mhm.
It's normally like, but there's this, and this, but like there's this, and this that I just don't want. So
Mhm.
you just have to ask yourself, like, are those things that are not good enough, right? Or not good enough, sorry. I'm gonna get in trouble for saying that. But like just not compatible to what you're looking for. Like deal breakers, right? Like it's important for you to have that awareness, be brave enough to say like yes and not guilty that like I need this for my own sanity,
Yeah.
and then go for it cuz it's important to know that. And then if you don't make those decisions, yeah, you're going to avoid it, right? You're avoiding it. It's an issue that you didn't resolve in your head.
Mhm.
And so you're going to be fearful of making any decision at
Yeah.
that point. Yeah.
I have a theory, and I've I've spoken to one of my good friends about this. We've had this conversation multiple times. This is just based off of our observations. But we found that. So I'll preface this by saying I graduated high school 8 years ago, and my friend and I, we went to high school together, and we found that a lot of the guys who in high school, for whatever reason, whether it be lacked confidence, maybe hit puberty late, whatever the case may be, the guys who did not engage with women, whether it be talking to them, whether it be sexually active, whether it be anything like that, anything other than like a platonic relationship, struggle now, I won't say at 25, 26, are struggling now to find that confidence to talk to girls now, to put themselves out there. Do you feel like that's accurate? Do you think there's anything behind that, or is this just like my experience?
I definitely think is really like accurate. Like you need to practice,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes there's you just got to do it, right? To try to see what you like and what you don't like, and if you get hurt, that's great, right? Welcome, like, and then vice versa. If you hurt someone that you ended up being a very good person, but you have to break up with them, like, great, welcome, right? Welcome to life, right? Like, if you're not really going through life experiencing these things and everything is theory in your head but you're not experiencing in real life, yeah, it can build up anxiety. And then earlier, right, because life stage wise, like let's say 8 years ago, all your friends were going through those things, right? And it's great, you guys are in the same life stage. But let's say if you never dated, right, and you were 8 years after, still same person. All your friends have experienced now. All your friends have hurt someone. They've been hurt. They've been heartbroken. They've been cheated on. Not saying it's a good thing, but like trauma is good, right? Then you would start learning from them, thinking that you know what's going to happen without actually trying it yourself, right? And that prevents action. That builds false anxiety, right? Anxiety is overthinking, right? And so you're learning through all your friends without actually doing the work, right? And yeah, it can really create inexperience in general.
Yeah, I feel I'm trying to try to put myself in that position of like, if I hadn't had those experiences, how I would think now. And I feel like I would be super anxious about all of these topics, whether it be having sex or talking, meeting someone, dating, all these things. It would be terrifying if there was no experience. And I feel like it's almost even scarier now because in high school, high school, for example, you have so many opportunities to talk to girls. I mean, you're at school, you're talking to girls, or your part-time job or whatever. And like, it's easy because you see them every day. But now 25, 26, a lot of people, like, depending on, if they work from home or they work in a field where there aren't a lot of women, it's like, okay, well, that environment, there's no opportunity to meet girls.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, then where are your opportunities? Is it online? Is it going to the gym? And then, like, some people don't like doing that either. And it turns to this thing where in high school, you always have the opportunity to, but now you're 25 and 26. And if you haven't done it yet, and you have not that there's no incentive anymore, there's obviously incentive, but there's nothing pushing you. There's no opportunities without you going out and finding those opportunities to meet women. That is scary.
Yeah. And like, you don't have the opportunity to develop your style, right? Like those nuances that you have to look out for in yourself and her, right? That is your dating style, is your masculine essence and like my feminine essence. It's like, you're kind of just, you don't have the opportunity to make mistakes, right? Oh, I said that came off a little bit creepy because you got feedback, right? Because you can't really have someone tell you, don't do this is creepy, but then maybe if you say it in a different way, it works for someone.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just a style. So you have to develop your style. You have to make mistakes. You have to say, hey, cutie, right, in a very creepy way. And you're like, okay, maybe I won't do that again, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's so important. Yeah.
And I feel like if you don't do it early, you'll just never be able to build that confidence. So then you'll lack self-confidence and self-esteem and all those things. So I definitely think it's important to get in early. Another question I had was, I feel like there are a lot of men who, for whatever the reason may be, feel the need to constantly be in a relationship or constantly at least be entertaining a woman, talking to women, and never take the time to grow themselves as an individual, as a single person, whatever you want to call it. Why do you think that is? Why do you think there's some men like that?
I'm sure everybody has heard about codependency, right? And I always say, like, you have to have codependency in a relationship to have a relationship, right? So it's really good. But again, if it goes overboard, if that is your only outlet to feeling whole and content about yourself, then when that relationship leaves, or if that relationship goes through turmoils, which it will, right? You've been in a relationship, I've been in a relationship, right? It's going to make you feel less than. And if you feel less than, you feel lost. And when you feel lost, when men feel lost, they feel loss of control. And when men feel loss of control, everything else is affected, right? And so if your relationship is the only attribute in which is filling your bucket, per se, of feeling successful or whole, right? Oh, you better know if that relationship does anything crazy, you're going to go crazy, right? So that, to answer that question, really important to know how much of an influence and reciprocal kind of influence is that relationship giving you, right? But important to be codependent, right? It's important, but don't let it be the only determining factor of your happiness.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know if it's connected, but something I always like, I don't want to say pride myself on, but something I really try to remind myself of is I don't want to get everything out of life or expect to get everything out of life from one person.
Yeah.
Yes, I have my girlfriend. I love her so much. She does so much for me, but I would feel like it's almost unfair to expect her to give me everything I need in life, whether it's someone to make me laugh, someone to make me cry, someone to, be able to lean on. Like, yeah, it's great that she can provide me with all of those things, but I don't want to go to her for every single one of those things. I feel like it's important to get some from my family and get some from my friends and get some from myself and get some from her.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what's so important. And what some people do is expect to get everything they need, every emotion, every piece of satisfaction simply from their significant other.
Yes, or like when the relationship is good, right? Or when they have someone, let's say, because your question was essentially like when why some men can never be not without a
Yeah,
girlfriend, right?
exactly.
When they have someone, then XYZ, right? Then they can conquer life. Then they can blah 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 blah, right? So that is a really bad equation, right? Like
Mhm.
the then, right? It's important to know, okay, it can be better if I had someone. If I had someone, it can be better. Maybe I can, I don't know, I can feel more powerful today, right? I
Mhm.
can take more risks and things like that. But, right, it's not the only thing that is making me do that. When it's the only if the relationship is taken away and then your life depletes, right? That's when it can get really unhealthy for men, and that's why you hear breakups are usually the worst for men, because with the relationship they're great and then the breakup and then everything downfalls. So let's find another girlfriend so that I
Mhm.
can now conquer life again, which is like this cyclical process of like, wait a minute, right? Like, why do you need a girlfriend in order for you to, you know, yeah, achieve
Mhm.
your dreams, right?
Do you feel that men uh, should prioritize their relationship with their significant other over the other relationships they have in their life, or do you kind of view it as like everything should kind of be prioritized equally in
uh,
terms of like like significant other compared to friends? Do you think it should be equal?
I don't think it should be equal, but I think like the relationship unit should be always in alignment with like loyalty wise, right? Um, with what they're trying to strive for in their society, right? So, um, prioritize. I always think like in a relationship, you should know what you're trying to achieve in this world, right? So she should always your girlfriend, right, should most of the times know like what you're trying to do as a team, right? And that is prioritization, like putting the relationship first, but you're achieving one goal together,
Mm.
right? So, um, yeah, so making space for like times that you are connecting with each other and like really talking about like splitting up the times between what you guys want to do outside of the relationship and being in alignment with that. That's a good team. Like
Mhm.
that's the really, really good team effort. And so, um, making sure you guys are prioritization, meaning you don't have to always choose what she wants per se, but you guys should prioritize the relationship so that the ship moves well, right?
Mhm.
You guys are always in the same alignment with topics and values and what you're choosing to do and goals and things like that so that you guys actually are moving together.
Mhm.
So prioritizing the relationship so that you guys can move together, I think is important, but just prioritizing like individual needs, sometimes it's important to know that like, hey, I can't do something for you because I have this. We're in alignment with that, right? Great,
Mhm.
right? Awesome. um so yeah, maybe I just think a little bit different, but
Yeah. I mean, I was just asking because I feel like throughout my life, I've met guys who kind of, I don't want to say over prioritize the relationship, but as soon
for
as
sure.
they get into a relationship, it's like relationship is up here and everything else, friends, family is down here.
Yeah.
And then it's how friendships end because it kind of turns into this thing where,
Yeah.
you know, people are like, your friends are going to be in relationships. Your friends are,
Yeah, you
are
have a
going to get
little
married
funeral
and do all
for them.
these things. And it turns into this thing where it's like, oh, well, how come everyone else is able to balance work and life and this and that? And for whatever reason, you prioritize this at the top and kind of neglect everyone or everything else in your life. And it
Yeah.
turns in this, I feel like for me over the last 3-4 years, I've lost more friends
Aw.
than it's okay, don't worry.
Aw.
But I've lost more friends over the last like 3-4 years than probably ever before, because we're finally getting into this world where you're not naturally seeing everyone every day. You don't go to high school anymore, or college, university, whatever the case may be, and you really have to make an effort if you want to see people to go out and see them. And I think that's why over the last few years, I guess whatever you want to call it, true colors come out and you start to see how people actually are, or how they are when life gets a little bit more complicated, life gets a little bit busier. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just rambling at this
No,
point.
that's a really good one, because that really digs into just um, like from an outsider's point of view, right? Like when you're seeing your friends in a relationship, you'll really see the ones who are in a healthy relationship and ones who are a little bit insecure in terms of like attachment style. So sometimes I wonder, right, if my girlfriend is just completely codependent, never ever wants to come out, right? Is she really in a secure relationship? Because if it's a good relationship, she'll feel safe like coming out and making time for other people, right? She wants to do that. She feels safe doing that with space. And because she knows like this man is staying, this
Mhm.
man is not going anywhere. And same with men, right? Like, I wonder if he's just completely doing everything with her or spending every minute of the time with her because he's not in a secure relationship. He doesn't feel safe in that attachment specifically to spend time with his guy friends or to see his mother or to do the things that he used to do, because if he does that, he's scared of losing her, right? So, I sometimes question things like that, because I genuinely think like a healthy, secure relationship. In the beginning, it's going to be like, yeah, you guys are, you're seeing each
Of
other all the
course.
time, right? Like I don't know, like five, oh my God, I'm getting trouble saying 5 times a day, right?
Yeah.
And things like that. Like the
Honeymoon
hormones are
phase.
coming, right? But there's a plateau, and that plateau is really good, right? That plateau is healthy. And when that plateau happens, it's you have security, hopefully, right? And then people will be safe, feel safe with space, right? Feel safe with space and feel safe with closeness.
Mm.
And it gets leveled out. And yeah, if it's a long-term codependency, there's probably one person in there that's like really insecure.
Mm.
Yeah.
I have so many more questions, but we only have time for one more. So 100%, I would love if you come back on and we can do another
Yeah,
hour.
of
But I
course.
have to ask you this one because my girlfriend and I debate this all the time.
Oh no.
Can men and women be friends? And let me preface this by saying, when I'm talking friends, I mean real friends, like not like, oh, as a big group we can all hang out together. I mean, I can hang out with this person one on one. We can have a friendship without either party ever catching feelings or anything like that. Can men and women be friends?
Blunt answer. I don't like giving like nuances. So I'm gonna give a blunt answer, but then obviously there's an addition,
Of
right?
course.
No,
Okay.
they cannot be friends. But, right, because maybe call me crazy, right? But I just know how men think, right? And I know also the power that women have over men, right? Um, but I mean, again, trust and loyalty is extremely important. And so those are the nuances. Like if you have full security of your girlfriend and vice versa, right? And she has full security in you, like I would say great for those people who can have those, like that kind of rule. But, right, that rule came out because there wasn't full security,
Mm.
right? And men sometimes, most of the times, you're questioning, like, why the heck is he friends with her? Like, my girlfriend's hot as hell, right? And he's way too kind, right? Like, what is going on, right?
Mm.
There's got to be something. If she texts him, like, hey, I've always had feelings for you one day, like, men are usually thinking he's so going like he's so gonna jump at it, right?
Mhm.
And that's kind of true, right? Like you wonder these things, but again, if your relationship has full security, I think, and you have full boundaries, even if those nuances were here, right? If you had the confidence that your partner won't entertain it, even if it was there, right? Then I think it's a great relationship. But it's like, okay, you can you have full trust. Maybe he has the hots for you,
Mhm.
right? But I trust you fully to just not entertain that,
Yeah.
right? So
I could not agree with you more. That's what I tell my girlfriend all the time. I'm like, you don't get. I know how guys think. Like that's how
yeah,
I believe. I'm like, look, a guy's not going to befriend a girl for no reason if he's not into her at all. That's my
yeah,
that's my belief.
I agree too. I
Thank you.
agree.
Awesome. I'm gonna tell her right after this, so she'll listen to this. But anyways, Christy, thank you so much for coming on. Like I
Yes.
said, I genuinely have so many more questions, so I'd love to have you back on as soon as possible. Um, but yeah, thank you so much. If there's anything you want to shout out, your pages, Men's Mental Health Institute,
Yeah,
all of that,
yeah,
do your
yeah.
thing.
Thanks for having me.
Of
Yeah,
course.
mental health is extremely important. Make sure you find a therapist that is proactive and not just kind of complacent, right? Yeah, follow me at Christie C Therapy on Instagram.
Instagram. There you go.
Yeah, thank you for having me,
No, of
Jesse.
course. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to Listen, and we'll see you next time.